Have you ever watched someone insult a hard-working man while standing on something that man built with his own hands? Most people expect an explosion, a shout, a fist slammed against the table. But the most dangerous people don't explode. They wait. Because the coldest revenge isn't fueled by anger, it's fueled by patience. If you've ever dreamed of seeing arrogance get exactly what it deserves, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay until the end. Because today's story proves one unforgettable truth. Never underestimate the quiet man who knows how to build and how to destroy. My name is Grant Harrison. I'm 58 years old, and for almost 4 decades I've made my living fixing things other people couldn't. Diesel engines, plumbing, electrical systems, heating, air conditioning. If it had gears, pipes, or wires, I could bring it back to life. These hands weren't soft. The skin across my palms looked more like worn leather than flesh. Every scar had a story. Every callus represented another mortgage payment, another birthday present for my daughter, another sacrifice my wife and I gladly made. People often looked at those rough hands and assumed I struggled financially. They couldn't have been more wrong. What they never understood was simple. Hard work compounds. So does discipline. While other people chased status symbols and expensive lifestyles, my wife Rachel and I quietly built something far more valuable. A successful contracting business. No investors. No inheritance. No lucky break. Just thousands of 12-hour days, one honest paycheck after another. Eventually those paychecks became investments. Those investments became properties. Those properties became financial freedom. And one summer, after 35 years of relentless work, I bought Rachel her dream. A 43-foot luxury motor yacht. Paid for. Every single dollar, not because I wanted to impress strangers. Because she'd spent 32 years believing in me when nobody else did. Watching her cry the first time she stepped aboard that yacht remains one of the happiest moments of my life. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "You actually did it." "No," I smiled. "We did." Our daughter Emily loved it just as much. She'd grown up watching me repair broken engines in our garage, handing me wrenches before she was tall enough to reach the toolbox. She understood what that yacht really represented. Not luxury. Victory. Years of invisible work finally becoming visible. Then Emily married Landon Brooks. Everyone else adored him. Expensive suits. Perfect smile. Confident handshake. Vice president at a prestigious real estate investment company before turning 35. Rachel thought he was charming. Emily believed she'd found the perfect husband. I smiled during family dinners, but something deep inside me refused to relax. It wasn't anything he said. It was everything he never asked. Not once did Landon ask how I'd built my company. Not once did he show genuine curiosity about the life I'd spent decades creating. To him, I wasn't Grant Harrison. I was simply the guy who worked with his hands. Every family dinner became another performance. Landon talked. Everyone else listened. Luxury cars, investment portfolios, exclusive clubs, private clients, 7-figure deals. He measured people by titles, by watches, by bank accounts, and every time his eyes landed on my weathered hands, I caught the smallest flicker of pity. He believed I'd spent my entire life fixing other people's problems because I couldn't build a successful life of my own. I let him believe it, because sometimes the greatest mistake an arrogant man can make is underestimating the quiet man sitting across the table. I had no idea that one careless joke aboard my yacht would become the first domino in the complete destruction of everything Landon Brooks had spent his life pretending to be. People often ask me when I first realized Landon wasn't simply arrogant. He was dangerous. It wasn't during a family dinner. It wasn't when he ignored my opinions. And it wasn't even when he looked down on my work. It happened the day I realized my daughter had stopped being herself. Emily had always been the loud one, the girl who laughed without worrying who was listening, the little kid who came home from school covered in paint because she'd rather create something than keep her clothes clean. Even as an adult, she carried that same light. She became one of the most respected pediatric nurses in Detroit, working impossible shifts while somehow still finding time to call her mother every evening. Children adored her. Parents trusted her. She had a gift that couldn't be taught. Then she married Landon. The change didn't happen overnight. It happened so slowly that most people never noticed. But fathers noticed things. The sparkle in her eyes faded first. Then came the pauses before answering simple questions. Then the careful choice of words, as though every sentence had to pass through an invisible filter before she allowed herself to speak. One Sunday, Rachel invited everyone over for dinner. The smell of roasted chicken drifted through the house while jazz music played softly from the kitchen speakers. For a few minutes, everything felt normal. Then Landon arrived. He didn't greet anyone before answering a business call. He walked straight into the living room, one finger raised as if telling the entire family to wait until someone important had finished speaking. 20 minutes later, he finally joined us at the table. "Sorry," he said with a grin. "$1 million problems." Nobody laughed. Rachel simply smiled politely and continued serving dinner. Emily quietly apologized on his behalf. That bothered me far more than his arrogance. Halfway through the meal, Rachel asked Emily how work had been. Emily's face brightened. "We had a little boy discharged today after 6 weeks in intensive care," she said. Watching him walk out holding his mother's hand honestly made every exhausting shift worth it. Before she could finish, Landon chuckled. "That's cute." Emily looked at him. "What?" I said, "That's cute." He casually sliced into his steak. "It's nice that your little hospital job keeps you entertained while I handle the serious financial responsibilities." The room froze. Rachel lowered her fork. I felt my jaw tighten. Emily forced a smile. "It's not just a job." "I know," Landon replied with fake affection. "You're helping people." Then he laughed again. "But let's be honest. One of us pays for this lifestyle." Emily looked down at her plate. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She simply became quiet. That silence echoed louder than any argument ever could. On the drive home that night, Rachel stared out the passenger window. "Did you see her?" she asked softly. "I did. She's disappearing." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "I know." Rachel sighed. "I don't like the way he talks to her." Neither did I. But accusing a husband without proof could push a daughter away instead of bringing her closer. So I waited. I watched. I listened. Because every machine gives warning signs before it completely breaks down. The trick is noticing them before everyone else does. Over the next several months, Landon's ego only grew. Every promotion made him louder. Every bonus made him crueler. He began bringing coworkers to family gatherings, turning birthdays into networking events. Conversations became competitions. If someone mentioned buying a new car, his was more expensive. If someone talked about a vacation, his resort cost twice as much. If someone celebrated paying off their mortgage, he smiled the way adults smile at children who proudly build sandcastles. Money wasn't something Landon earned. It was something he used to measure human worth. And according to his invisible scale, I ranked somewhere near the bottom. What he didn't know was that while he spent his evenings talking about wealth, I'd spent 40 years quietly building it. Then came the invitation that changed everything. "Landon wants everyone on the yacht next Saturday," Emily said during one of our weekly phone calls. Rachel smiled. "That'll be fun." I smiled too. But something inside me, something I'd learned to trust after decades of diagnosing engines, whispered that next Saturday would change our family forever. The morning of the yacht trip couldn't have been more perfect. The Detroit River shimmered beneath the summer sun, reflecting streaks of gold across the calm water. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh water and polished cedar from the marina. Rachel stood beside me on the dock, smiling as she watched our friends arrive. "This is going to be a beautiful day," she whispered. I smiled back. "I think so too." If only I'd known what was coming. One by one, our guests stepped aboard. Our lifelong friends, Daniel and Karen, Rachel's sister, Monica, and her husband, Richard. Then Emily arrived, wearing a simple white sundress, looking happier than she had in weeks. Behind her came Landon. Designer sunglasses, a pressed linen shirt, boat shoes that looked like they'd never touched a real dock before. Trailing behind him were 2 coworkers I'd never met. He hadn't asked if he could invite them. He simply assumed he could. I greeted them politely anyway. This was my yacht. My wife had spent the entire morning preparing food. No guest would ever feel unwelcome because of me. Within minutes, Landon had transformed the upper deck into his personal stage. His coworkers surrounded him, laughing at every story. He pointed toward downtown Detroit. "One of those office towers will probably have my firm's name on it someday." The men laughed. "I wouldn't bet against you." I simply started the engines. The familiar rumble beneath my feet felt comforting. Unlike people, machines were honest. If something was wrong, they told you. As we cruised farther down the river, I noticed a slow drip coming from the galley faucet below deck. Nothing serious. Probably a worn washer. I quietly excused myself. I'll be right back. No one paid much attention. Inside the galley, I opened my toolbox. The smell of machine oil mixed with polished wood always relaxed me. 4 minutes. That's all it took. Turn off the water. Remove the handle. Replace the washer. Tighten everything back together. Done. Simple, preventive maintenance had saved me thousands of dollars throughout my life. Ignore small problems, and eventually they become expensive disasters. I climbed back onto the upper deck, wiping my hands with a clean towel. Landon noticed me immediately. Grant. He raised his whiskey glass with a grin. Where'd you disappear to? Fix the galley faucet. It had started dripping. One of his co-workers nodded. Already having plumbing problems? I smiled. Just routine maintenance. Then, I saw it. That tiny expression crossed Landon's face. The look people get when they think they've found the perfect opportunity to impress an audience. He glanced at his co-workers. Then, back at me. A slow smile spread across his face. You know, he said loudly enough for everyone on the yacht to hear. I've always believed plumbers don't belong on luxury yachts. Silence, complete, absolute silence. Even the laughter from nearby boats seemed to disappear. Rachel froze. Emily slowly lowered her drink. Daniel stopped chewing. Richard straightened from the railing. Every eye turned toward me. Landon smiled proudly, expecting applause, expecting laughter, expecting me to chuckle along while everyone enjoyed the joke at my expense. Instead, I simply looked at him. For several long seconds. No anger, no shouting, no embarrassment. Just silence. The longer I looked, the more uncertain his smile became. His co-workers stopped grinning. Emily looked horrified. Rachel's eyes filled with disappointment, not in me. In him. Finally, I gave one slow nod, turned around, walked calmly back toward the helm. Behind me, I heard Landon nervously clear his throat. So anyway, he said much louder than before, as I was saying about that investment property, nobody was listening anymore. The damage had already been done. I rested my hands on the wheel and stared at the endless stretch of water ahead. Outwardly, I looked calm. Inside, something had changed forever. The insult itself didn't hurt. I'd been called worse during 40 years in construction. No, what hurt was where he'd chosen to say it. On my yacht. In front of my wife. In front of my daughter. In front of the friends who knew exactly how many years I'd sacrificed to build the life he was mocking. At that exact moment, I stopped seeing Landon as an arrogant son-in-law. I started seeing him as a man whose character needed to be exposed, not through shouting, not through revenge fueled by rage, but through truth. Cold, patient, unavoidable, as the yacht cut smoothly through the river, I made myself one silent promise. One day, Landon Brooks would learn that the quiet man he laughed at was the last person he ever should have underestimated. People think revenge begins with anger. They're wrong. Anger is loud. It burns fast. It clouds judgment. Real revenge begins the moment your emotions become quieter than your thoughts. That night, after everyone left the marina, Rachel and I drove home almost entirely in silence. The highway lights flickered across the windshield as the city slowly disappeared behind us. Rachel finally spoke. I've never seen Emily look so embarrassed. Neither had I. She wasn't embarrassed because her husband had made a joke. She was embarrassed because, deep down, she knew he meant every word. I pulled into our driveway and shut off the truck. For several minutes, neither of us moved. Finally, Rachel reached over and squeezed my hand. What are you thinking? I looked at the garage where thousands of tools hung neatly organized on the wall. When an engine starts making a strange noise, I said quietly, you don't replace random parts. You find the cause. She nodded. So you're going to find his. The next morning, I went back to work. Not because I needed the money. Because work cleared my mind. Every wrench I turned gave my thoughts direction. Every repaired engine reminded me of something important. Machines never lie. People do. Over the following weeks, I stopped reacting to Landon. Instead, I started observing him. At family dinners, I barely spoke. I simply listened. He mentioned a temporary cash flow issue. A week later, it became capital tied up. Then it changed again. Some investors are being impatient. Different words. Same problem. That caught my attention. Successful businessmen don't repeatedly explain why money isn't available. Only desperate ones do. Then I noticed something else. Emily had started paying restaurant bills before Landon could reach for his wallet. The first time I ignored it. The second time, I watched carefully. The third time, I knew something wasn't right. One afternoon, Rachel called me into the kitchen. "I think Emily's hiding something." "What makes you say that?" She asked if we still had the emergency savings account information. I frowned. "Did she say why?" Rachel slowly shook her head. "No." But she looked frightened. That single word settled heavily in my chest. Frightened, not stressed, not worried. Frightened. A few days later, I received an unexpected phone call from my oldest friend, Richard. "You got a minute?" "Always. You remember those two guys Landon brought onto your yacht?" "I do. One of them is my cousin's client." That made me stop what I was doing. "And?" Richard lowered his voice. "They're quietly pulling money out of Landon's investment firm." I felt something click inside my mind. "Why?" "They won't say. But they're moving fast." After we hung up, I stood alone in my workshop staring at an unfinished diesel engine. Something bigger was happening. Far bigger than an arrogant son-in-law making jokes. I just didn't know what. Yet, over the next month, I began connecting pieces that everyone else ignored. Cancelled vacations. Late-night phone calls. Missed family dinners. Emily looked exhausted. Landon looked distracted. His expensive confidence had begun to crack. He still wore the tailored suits, still drove the luxury SUV, still bragged about million-dollar deals. But his smile no longer reached his eyes. It reminded me of a polished boat sitting above water while slowly taking on leaks below the surface. From the dock, everything looked perfect. Underneath, disaster was already spreading. One Friday afternoon, Richard called again. This time his voice was serious. "I think I know what's happening." "What did you find?" "My cousin works with commercial property records." I stayed silent. Richard continued. "There are transactions that don't make sense. Money is entering one investment, then disappearing somewhere else." My heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. That always happened when I solved difficult mechanical problems. The picture was finally coming together. "Can you prove it?" I asked. "Not yet, but someone eventually will." After we ended the call, I walked into the backyard where Rachel was watering her roses. She looked up immediately. "What is it?" I stared across the fence for a long moment. "I think Landon isn't just arrogant. I think he's hiding something illegal." Rachel slowly lowered the watering can. "What are you going to do?" I looked toward the setting sun. "For now?" "Nothing." She looked surprised. "Nothing?" I nodded. "If he's lying, he'll make another mistake. People like Landon always do. And when they do, I'll be ready." At that moment, I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was chasing the truth. Because I had learned something after nearly 40 years of fixing broken machines. Every hidden crack eventually reaches the surface. And when it does, everything built on top of it comes crashing down. I had a feeling Landon Brooks's entire life was about to collapse. He just didn't know it yet. There's an old saying among mechanics: a machine doesn't fail the day it breaks. It fails the day someone ignores the first warning sign. Landon had ignored dozens. Now, they were all coming due. About 2 weeks after my conversation with Richard, I invited Emily to lunch at a small diner we'd been visiting since she was in high school. Nothing fancy, just fresh coffee, homemade pie, and a waitress who still remembered our names. When Emily walked in, my heart sank. She smiled, but it looked forced. The dark circles beneath her eyes told a different story. She sat down, wrapped both hands around her coffee mug, and sighed. "Tough week?" I asked. "You could say that." There was a long silence between us. Finally, I leaned forward. "Emily, are you happy?" She looked down at the table, not because she didn't hear me, because she didn't know how to answer. After nearly 30 seconds, she whispered, "I don't remember." Those 3 words hit harder than anything Landon had ever said to me. I reached across the table and gently placed my hand over hers. "You don't have to protect him anymore." Her eyes filled with tears. "I've been trying so hard, Dad, I know. He keeps saying everything is temporary. He says one big deal will fix everything." I stayed quiet. "What kind of problems?" I asked softly. Emily hesitated before answering. "He borrowed against our savings." My stomach tightened. "Without asking me." She swallowed. "Then he started moving money between accounts. He always has an explanation. But lately, he gets angry whenever I ask questions." I nodded slowly. Everything Richard suspected, everything I'd begun piecing together, was becoming real. Emily, she looked at me. I need you to do something. Anything. I want you to hire your own attorney. Her eyes widened. Dad, please, don't tell Landon. Don't warn him. And don't sign another financial document until your lawyer reads it first. For the first time in months, I saw relief cross her face. Almost as though she'd been waiting for someone to give her permission to stop pretending everything was okay. She quietly nodded. Okay, the next 6 weeks moved like a chess match. Every move mattered. Emily hired one of the best family attorneys in the city. Richard quietly introduced me to a retired financial investigator he'd trusted for years. We weren't looking for revenge. We were looking for facts. Everything we uncovered came from public records, financial filings, property transfers, corporate documents. No hacking, no spying, just patience. The picture became clearer every day. Landon had built an image of unstoppable success. Behind that image, his investment company was bleeding money. Projects had failed. Investors had been misled. Money from new clients appeared to be covering losses from older ones. The deeper we looked, the worse it became. The investigator closed the final folder and looked directly at me. Grant, this isn't just bad business. This could become a criminal investigation. Those words echoed in my mind all the way home. That evening, Rachel found me sitting alone on the back porch. You know now, don't you? I nodded. I know enough. She sat beside me. What happens next? I stared into the darkness. I don't destroy him. She looked confused. The truth will. A week later, the phone rang. It was Landon. His voice sounded unusually cheerful. Grant, I've been meaning to call. What can I do for you? I was wondering if we could stop by tomorrow. Emily and I. Of course. The next evening they arrived. Emily barely spoke. Landon, however, couldn't stop talking. Business, markets, temporary setbacks, future opportunities. Finally, he leaned forward. I actually came because I need a favor. I already knew what was coming. Go ahead. He cleared his throat. I'm dealing with a short-term liquidity issue. I only need a bridge loan. He slid a folded piece of paper across my dining table. The number written on it made Rachel quietly inhale. It wasn't thousands. It wasn't even hundreds of thousands. It was enough money to save a collapsing empire. Landon smiled confidently. I'll pay every penny back. I just need family to believe in me. I slowly folded the paper, placed it back in front of him, then calmly said one word. No. His smile disappeared. I'm sorry? I said no. His face turned red. Grant, this affects Emily too. I looked directly into his eyes. No, it affects Emily because of the choices you made. For the first time since I'd known him, Landon looked afraid. Real fear. Not embarrassment. Not frustration. Fear. He stood so quickly his chair scraped across the hardwood floor. You'll regret this. I calmly stood as well. No, you will. He stared at me. Then I delivered the sentence I'd been waiting weeks to say. The truth has a way of finding people. And when it finds you, no amount of money will save you. His confident mask finally shattered. Without another word, he stormed out of my house. The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. Rachel looked at me. Do you think he knows? I watched his SUV disappear down the street. He knows something. I paused. But he has no idea. Just how much. Somewhere in the city, the investigation had already begun. Landon Brooks simply hadn't realized. His countdown had started. For years, Landon Brooks had lived by one simple belief. If you looked successful, people would never question whether you actually were. He had fooled investors. He had fooled colleagues. He had fooled my daughter. But the truth has one quality that arrogance never understands. It doesn't stay buried forever. 3 weeks after Landon stormed out of my house, the first cracks became visible. Not to the public. Not yet. But to the people who mattered. His phone stopped ringing as often. Meetings were suddenly postponed. Business lunches were canceled. Partners who once praised his vision now answered his calls with cautious, rehearsed voices. The confidence that had once filled every room he entered had vanished. Emily noticed it before anyone else. He barely sleeps, she told Rachel over the phone one evening. He walks around the house all night. He keeps checking his email. He jumps every time his phone rings. Rachel gently asked, Has he told you what's happening? Emily shook her head. He says everything's under control. Then she whispered something that broke my heart. I don't think he believes that anymore. A few days later, Emily called me. Dad, I moved my important documents. Good. My attorney helped me separate my accounts. Excellent. There was a pause. I feel guilty. I closed my eyes. No, sweetheart. You feel responsible. Those are two different things. Silence. Then I heard her crying quietly. I kept making excuses for him. I thought if I loved him enough, he'd become the man he pretended to be. My voice softened. You love the man he convinced you existed. That isn't your failure. That's his deception. For the first time in months, she sounded lighter. Not happy, but free. Another week passed. Then it happened. Richard called just after sunrise. It's official. I set down my coffee. What is? The authorities have opened a formal investigation. I didn't celebrate. I simply thanked him and hung up. Rachel looked at me across the breakfast table. It started? I nodded once. It started. News travels strangely among wealthy people. It doesn't arrive as headlines. It arrives as whispers. Within days, Landon's social world began collapsing. Golf invitations disappeared. Private dinners were cancelled. Investors quietly withdrew. Former friends suddenly became impossible to reach. The same people who once laughed at his jokes now crossed the street to avoid awkward conversations. Status, I'd learned, exists only as long as people agree to believe in it. Then came the call I had expected. Landon. His voice was different. Gone was the polished executive. Gone was the smug confidence. In its place, desperation. Grant, I need to talk. I don't think there's anything left to discuss. Please, it's about Emily. My grip tightened around the phone. Emily already has legal counsel. A long silence. Then, you knew. I didn't answer. You've known for weeks. Still, I remained silent. Finally, he whispered, You set me up. For the first time since this entire nightmare began, I smiled. No, I gave you every opportunity to tell the truth. You chose not to. The official investigation quickly uncovered what months of arrogance had hidden. Financial records, misrepresented investments, money transferred between accounts to conceal mounting losses. Every document painted the same picture. Landon hadn't been managing success. He'd been managing appearances. And appearances don't survive evidence. His company suspended him immediately. Within days, the board dissolved the investment division he'd spent years building. The man who once bragged about million-dollar deals couldn't even enter his own office. Emily officially filed for divorce. There were no dramatic screaming matches, no revenge speeches, just facts, bank statements, legal documents, financial records. Truth. When the settlement was finalized, Emily walked away with what was rightfully hers. The house remained in her name. Her retirement savings were protected. Every hidden debt Landon had created stayed exactly where it belonged, with him. The day everything became official, she called me. It's over. How do you feel? She laughed softly through tears. I forgot what peace feels like. I looked toward the marina where Rachel's promise rested quietly against the dock. I'd like to take the yacht out this weekend. She smiled. I'd love that. As for Landon, the legal process moved forward without mercy. He accepted responsibility through a plea agreement, heavy financial penalties, years of restitution payments, permanent removal from managing other people's investments. The career he'd spent a decade building ended in a courtroom, not because I destroyed it, because his own lies finally caught up with him. The man who mocked honest work would now spend years paying for dishonest choices. But one final conversation still remained, and it would become the most satisfying moment of all. People always imagine revenge as a dramatic moment, a shouting match, a public humiliation, someone walking away while the other person stands defeated. Life rarely works that way. The most satisfying victories don't come with applause. They come with peace. 2 months after Emily's divorce was finalized, summer returned to Detroit. The marina buzzed with life. Families loaded coolers onto boats. Children laughed along the docks. The river sparkled beneath a cloudless sky. For the first time in years, Emily looked like herself again. She arrived carrying homemade sandwiches, wearing jeans and a baseball cap, smiling before she'd even stepped aboard. Rachel hugged her tightly. I've missed this smile. Emily laughed. So have I. Hearing those words filled my chest with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Not because Landon had lost, Because my daughter had finally found herself again. We untied the lines. The diesel engines purred exactly as they always had. Strong, reliable, honest. As the yacht eased away from the dock, Emily walked beside me at the helm. She rested her elbows on the rail and watched the water roll beneath us. Dad. Yeah? I finally understand something. I smiled. What's that? She looked across the river. When Landon laughed because you fixed that leaking faucet, he thought you were doing a plumber's job. I nodded. But that's not what you were doing. She turned toward me. You were protecting the boat. A tiny leak becomes a big leak. A big leak becomes serious damage, and serious damage eventually sinks everything. I couldn't help smiling. That's exactly right. She laughed softly. He never understood that. No, he never understood what honest work actually looks like. We stood there quietly. The breeze carried the smell of fresh water through the open deck. Rachel joined us with 3 cups of coffee. Without saying a word, she handed one to each of us. Some moments don't need conversation. They simply need to be lived. About an hour later, we returned to the marina. As I secured the ropes, I noticed a familiar black SUV parked near the entrance. My stomach didn't tighten. My pulse didn't rise. Instead, I felt absolutely nothing. Landon stepped out. Gone were the expensive suits. Gone was the polished confidence. His shoulders slumped beneath a plain blue shirt. His face looked older. Tired, he walked slowly toward the dock until he stopped several feet away. I just wanted to talk. Rachel quietly led Emily toward the cabin, giving us privacy. I remained where I was. What do you want, Landon? He looked down before answering. I lost everything. I waited. My job, my reputation, my friends, my marriage. Still, I said nothing. Finally, he looked up. I came to apologize. There was genuine regret in his eyes. Not regret for insulting me. Regret for becoming the man he'd become. I'm sorry for what I said. I'm sorry for how I treated you. And, he swallowed hard. I'm sorry for the way I treated Emily. For several seconds, only the sound of water touching the hull filled the silence. Then I spoke. Do you remember the day you stood on this yacht? He nodded. You told everyone plumbers didn't belong here. I remember. I stepped closer. Do you know what you actually insulted that day? He frowned. My job? I slowly shook my head. No. You insulted every early morning, every missed vacation, every blister, every overtime shift, every sacrifice Rachel and I made so our daughter could have opportunities we never had. I looked directly into his eyes. You saw rough hands, and assumed they belonged to a man beneath you. They built everything you spent years pretending to be. His eyes filled with tears. I know that now. I believe you. His expression changed. You do? I do. He looked confused. But believing you, I continued quietly, doesn't erase consequences. He lowered his head. I know. I extended my hand. After a brief hesitation, he shook it. Not because we were friends. Not because everything was forgiven. But because hatred had already served its purpose. Holding on to it any longer would only burden me. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Landon. He stopped. Without looking back, he asked, yeah? I smiled. Next time you meet a man with rough hands, ask him what he built before deciding who he is. He nodded once, then walked away. This time, for good. That evening, Rachel, Emily, our closest friends Daniel, Karen, Richard, and Monica gathered on the upper deck as the sun slowly disappeared beneath the horizon. Laughter echoed across the water. Coffee replaced whiskey. Peace replaced tension. Emily leaned against the rail beside me. You know what the best part is? What? You never actually got revenge. I looked at her with a smile. No? She shook her head. You simply gave the truth enough time to catch him. I laughed. You know, I think you're right. The engines hummed beneath our feet. The river stretched endlessly ahead. For a long moment I looked at my weathered hands. Hands that had fixed engines, built businesses, raised a family, protected the people I loved. People like Landon see calluses and think they represent limitation. They couldn't be more wrong. Calluses are proof. Proof that something worth building required effort. Proof that honest work leaves marks. And those marks are badges of honor. If this story reminded you that character will always outlast arrogance, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more unforgettable revenge stories, and tell us in the comments, Have you ever watched someone underestimate the wrong person? Until next time, remember this. Never laugh at the man who knows how to fix what's broken. One day, he might quietly repair a problem that exposes everything you've tried to hide.